Hello, and welcome to the Simple Joys podcast. Thanks for being here to indulge your lust for adventure, your penchant for bliss, to indulge your zest for reverie and your predilection for the absurd, and more than anything, to indulge me, your host, Mr. Joseph J. Ward. For the next 5 minutes, I'd like to invite you on an adventure into your own imagination. You should probably close your eyes, unless you're driving or operating heavy machinery. Are you? Are you operating heavy machinery? God, I'd love to know what you're doing right now. I'd like you to imagine you're in a tent and it's morning, 6 a.m. You're alone, lying prostrate on a deflated, inflatable mattress. It remains valid to call it an inflatable mattress because it is possible to inflate it. It simply does not remain inflated. Last night by 2 a.m, the mat was completely flat, as it had been by 2 a.m. every night for the past 3 weeks. Some nights over the past 3 weeks, you've sat up in the night, shuffled your bottom off the flat mat, and in a half-somnambulant daze you've folded yourself in half at the waist, squeezed your head between your knees to reach the valve, and you have blown. Hard, like a man possessed, or a woman possessed. But last night you did not. You let the mattress lose all semblance of life without your interference. Your tent is green on the outside, and as the sun pokes up over the hill to the east, the tent is flooded with a green light such that the very air inside the tent seems to be green. You're awake. You've been awake for a while, and you're reading a book. Are you with me? Are you enjoying this little voyage into your imagination? Just take a moment to look at where your mind is right now. What gaps have you filled in for yourself? What are you wearing? Are you in a sleeping bag? Are you wearing socks? What do the soles of your feet feel like? What do they look like? When was the last time you saw the soles of your feet? Can you touch them together so that both heels and both big toes are touching simultaneously? Nice. Over the past few weeks, you've spoken to almost no one. The people you meet, and you do meet people every day, those people could not be kinder, more generous, more welcoming and inquisitive, but you don't share a common language. You can't speak to each other but for a smile, a laugh, a point, a gesture. Contact with farmers, shepherds, local villagers is fulfilling, and you don't feel lonely, but it is to yourself that you speak, leagues more than to anyone else. The most you've interacted with another living thing in the last 20 days has been with Tommy Montgomery, the dog that's been following you for 72 hours. When you went to sleep last night, he was lying outside your tent. You hope he's still there now. You're reading a book in the tent. You've read the same book every morning and every evening for 3 weeks. It's been your confidant, your friend, your closest ally, your captain, your wingman, your buddy-in-chief. It's a guide, a hiking companion. It provides practical information about where you are, what you're seeing, where you should go and where you shouldn't. It's a good companion. It's unemotional, familiar, relaxed, knowledgeable, assured. It's never hysterical, never catastrophizing. You've spoken to it twice a day for 3 weeks, and it has made you feel safe. You put the book down and wriggle out of your sleeping bag. You touch the soles of your feet against each other. Nice. You needn't get dressed. You're already wearing all the clothes you have with you. Nice. You sit with your knees up in the corner of the tent. Roll up the deflated inflatable mattress. No need to deflate. Triple nice. You stuff your sleeping bag into its sleeping bag and pull the toggle. You unzip the door to the tent, inner, then outer, and you lob your mat and sleeping bag out into the day. Then you follow them out. Tommy Montgomery looks up at you with an expectant smile. He's sitting exactly where you left him last night. You don't know it yet, but today will be a monumental day. It will be neither wholly good nor wholly bad, but it will stay with you for at least 8 months. And at that point, you might make a podcast about it. I'd stop operating the heavy machinery now if I were you. Okay, I'll break the bad to you first. Today will be your last day with Tommy Montgomery. You're going to be ambushed by 2 much larger dogs, and Tommy Montgomery will leg it, possibly to create a diversion to rescue you, or possibly to abandon you for mauling. You choose. Now here's the good stuff. Today, you're going to have a real conversation with a person. Yep, that's right, full sentences, back and forth, an exchange of stories, multiple participants, the works. You'll meet a number of people today, have a number of conversations, be inducted briefly back into the world of the living. None of the people you meet today will be people you've met before, but one of them will be a person you feel like you know. Someone you feel like you know better than anyone at this present moment. Someone who's been a confidant, a friend, an ally, who's been your captain, your wingman, your buddy-in-chief, every morning and every evening for the past 3 weeks. Okay, open your eyes. They weren't closed, were they? I hope you enjoyed that. I did. You're probably all a bit confused, and I'm sure none more than this week's sensational guest, Mr. Tom Allen. The truth is, this is the story I told Tom when I met him in Dilijan after 3 weeks on my own walking the trail he created in Armenia and reading his guidebook every evening before I went to sleep and every morning when I woke up. You, the freakish creep in the story, was in fact me. And Tom was my imaginary guide who communicated with me through my Kindle twice a day. That day, the day I lost Tommy Montgomery, was also the day that I arrived in Dilijan. I ambled, half delirious, into Dilijan Hikers Hostel, the hostel that Tom founded in Dilijan, so I had read in his guidebook. And with madness in my eyes, I asked the man who worked there, "Is he here?" And he was there. In fact, I had arrived on the hostel's last night before it closed for 6 months. Tom and his wonderful wife Tenny looked after me for 2 days while I regained my sanity and periodically quoted his own guidebook at him, which I'm sure he found thoroughly weird. Tom was so kind and supportive. This was my first ever long-distance hike, and I had so many questions for him. Is my bag too heavy? Should I get new shoes? I've snapped my pole in half. Is that a problem? His answers were totally relaxed and level-headed, and I realised that most of these questions didn't matter. It seemed like a lifetime of adventure had taught Tom that the most important principle of adventure is you do you. Tom Allen is a writer, trail prospector, relentless supporter of the worldwide exploration community, and a gift to adventurers everywhere. At the age of 23, he set off to cycle round the world. He discovered that the bicycle is an unparalleled way to see the world. It's free, fast, and completely immersive. You're fully independent, he said, but also totally exposed to everything that comes at you. He's explored over 50 countries by bike, published 5 books and 3 full-length films. He has an ongoing blog with over 500,000 words and counting. And he has conceived and overseen the building of 2 national trails in Armenia. Everything he's done in his career has been in an attempt to make himself useful to the exploration community and to share his wisdom. As far as adventuring goes, he's a living legend. Today he works as Expeditions and Fieldwork Manager at the Royal Geographical Society. The RGS offers support to anyone who aspires to explore, support in the form of funding, advice, platforms for disseminating their stories, and Tom is the man who helps to deliver that support. You can find links to his books, films and blog in the episode description. His blog, Tom's Bike Trip, and his book, How to Hit the Road, are unbelievable resources for anyone planning a long bike trip. I used them liberally when massively overthinking my 5-day cycle to Sheffield a few months ago. His book, Janapar, is an account of his one-of-a-kind experience setting off on a round-the-world cycling trip. And Janapar is also a documentary, so you can read it and then watch him do it, which is quite surreal. And then there's Karen, another of his films, which is about his mission to kayak down Iran's longest river. And it gives an unbelievably true account of the beautiful unpredictability of adventure. I think you can probably tell how excited I am to have Tom on the podcast, and I hope I don't embarrass myself in the interview you're about to hear. So, without any further fawning, here he is, Tom Allen, on the Simple Joys podcast. I think if you asked most people to name an explorer, they would name someone who died 100 years ago. How would you change the definition of explorer?
How? I think essentially it's leading by example. And a lot of what I've done in the past has been about building a movement in the direction of a cause. So, I started out advocating for bicycle travel as a means of understanding and seeing the world and understanding your place in it as an individual, just because I thought it was just such an amazing way, an unparalleled way, I think, to experience life on Earth on two wheels, fully independent, but also being exposed to everything that came at you. Similar to long distance walking, but you just have that extra range on a bicycle, which just meant you could feasibly go much further and have a much more diverse range of experiences as a result. So having had that myself, I, rather than putting myself on a pedestal, it was like, well, how can I just activate more people, enable more people to give it a go? Mm-hmm. So that's how I kind of ended up becoming a writer and a filmmaker. I just wanted to spread the word about this this mode of transport and this way of traveling that I thought just had such value. And then, beyond that, I ended up in the invisible world of trail building, the people who create the routes that we follow and the communities that, support that whole industry, which we just don't think about as people, as travelers and trail users. You don't think about who's involved in actually creating these things most of the time. And again, this was something that you did not go out and do on your own in the hope of, I guess any kind of recognition in particular. Is you don't do it for heroics or to get the credit for it. It's actually something that just involves huge numbers of people all working together. And I honestly think that the future of exploration, and this is kind of the thing that I'm pushing for here at the RGS, is one in which is much more inclusive. And I do not mean that in a tokenistic or kind of cliched way. It literally includes more people, because the job is much bigger than a handful of high-profile individuals could do on their own. We just need more people doing it. I mean, not to get too philosophical or tie myself up in knots, but there's a vast amount we still don't know about the world that we live on. And the best way to understand it is to explore it and record what we find and share it. This is something that historically was massively resource intensive and took a lot of time and was very inefficient. Now we live in a different world where the digital revolution has happened. The tools are available. Information about how to do it is much more readily available. And, we are a more wealthy world. We've got more resources at our disposal. And so kind of why not just broaden the whole project out a bit more and get more people involved and more engaged. And then that is the ideal, like that's the, the kind of the idealistic vision. And then, how best to achieve it? Well, probably getting a job at the RGS is going to be part of that. I hope.
And going back to where this started for you, and I suppose going back to cycling in particular, because that is where it started, how did that come about in the first place?
Cycling, I think it was quite a pragmatic decision to use the bicycle. I was 23 and I'd recently graduated, and so I had a student loan to pay off and a student overdraft, and no savings. And yet I wanted to go and see the world before I ended up in a career and got, acquired all of the commitments of adulthood. And I was just looking at what my options would be, and there were lots of ways to travel that were very popular, and my friends who were doing it or had done it, which all involved spending a lot of money on transport and accommodation, and then having some fun in between. And that would basically just burn through any money I could get together very rapidly. Didn't sound like a very good idea. So, okay, how to eliminate some of these big ticket costs of travel, how to get rid of the transport, how to get rid of the overnights. And I was in Edinburgh in the summer of 2006. I was working temporarily at the festival, and I went into a bookshop on one of my days off and found in the travel section a book called The Adventure Cycle Touring Handbook. And this was totally by chance, and I picked it out and I bought it and spent the afternoon sitting under a tree on the meadows in Edinburgh reading this book. And I was absolutely blown away to discover that there was a whole subculture of people exploring the world on bicycles with tents. And I just did, kind of light bulb moment. That is the way to do it. That is the way to whittle down your kind of financial needs to an absolute bare minimum, and then just have all this freedom to go wherever you like. The only fuel is food, kind of thing. And you can carry enough food for a week or a month or whatever. So I was absolutely inspired to do that.
So cycling was kind of just a means to an end from that perspective to begin with, at least.
Absolutely. It was not because I really liked riding bicycles. I kind of did like riding bikes, but it was kind of mountain biking was something that I'd done a bit of at university, and bicycles were basically a means of transport and not a lot else. But all of a sudden they became this instrument for travel.
Mm-hmm. And did you set off alone?
No, I set off with two friends. I set off with my old housemate and mountain biking buddy from university, and then also a school friend of mine who, again, he was kind of my local riding partner in the part of England that I'd grown up in. Yeah. So two people close to hand who also rode bicycles occasionally, basically.
Yeah.
And happened to be good friends. And so, we all kind of got really, really enthusiastic about this thing, and spent a few months kind of getting ready and getting the gear together and planning it, and set off in June 2007, I think it was.
And what was the plan?
The plan was very simple. It was to try and cycle around the world. I make no apology for how overambitious that was. I was 23, didn't know what I didn't know, and all the rest of it. We set off with this mad grand plan, inspired by others who'd done similar things. What happened as a result of setting off with that plan was, transformational, and two out of the three of us spent several years on the road as a result of that. I don't know how much more of the story do you want me to give away here?
So true. Sorry, we need to tease the book but not give it all the way away. Yeah, because I just 2 weeks ago I did my first ever cycling trip, and I did it on my own, and I found that the actual riding, being alone was fine. When you stop is when I found that I would have loved to have some company, and I think maybe just in terms of being able to share in the nice moments and also maybe in the pain would have been a valuable thing, because I suppose with that, and also with the Transcaucasian Trail, which we'll come on to, when I was there, I also found that I was experiencing the mood swings in extremely quick succession, more so than on any other trip I'd done before. I felt like I was experiencing the highest highs and the lowest lows in a 24-hour period. And I think the fact that I was alone maybe made those a bit more acute, and also it might have been easier to deal with if I was with someone. What's your experience of adventures with company versus adventures alone?
I think I've been through the same emotional experience, let's put it. And I think, on a bicycle, I mean, I was with two friends at the beginning of this big trip, my first big trip. I don't remember like the highs and the lows being moderated by that, actually. In fact, I think I sometimes felt more alone in the company of the same two people than I would have done had I actually been alone. And after about 6 months, so after a few weeks, one of my friends decided to head back home. He'd got what he wanted out of the experience. And then me and my other friend, my school friend, Andrew, we lasted about 6 months cycling as a pair. But we did ultimately find that forced proximity, that kind of 24/7, proximity, having to share every decision, all the minutiae, and it was just turning into one big, long, exhausting compromise. And we were losing our independence. We actually, I felt, I no longer know who I am as an individual, because I am never anything other than one half of a two-person show to all the people that we met along the way, which is such a big part of a cycle journey, if you're on roads and cycling between places with people living in them. And it just started to grate. And I think our kind of motivations also started to differ as we developed, as we learned what we were in it for. And so, as I say, it became more and more of a compromise, and ultimately one we decided wasn't actually worth it. And so after 6 months, we went our separate ways, amicably, although not without a few arguments. And I think after that, I primarily was alone, travelling by bicycle for the next couple of years, with a couple of occasions when I was cycling with somebody else, but mostly I was then travelling alone. And the mood swings, I completely empathise with that experience. I found that was very much the case early on in the solo travel experience, because I simply wasn't used to it, and I didn't actually have the tools to manage my own mind. And I won't go into all the details, but that kind of led me to kind of do a bit of research and reading around that, the idea of, we now call it mindfulness, and it's quite trendy, but the idea that there are techniques that you can use to manage your own thoughts. I kind of went down that path while I was on the road and afterwards, and came to a much more healthy place about it as a result. But kind of exposed this kind of gaping hole in our kind of cultural, in the kind of Western culture of introspection and reflection and mindfulness that was missing, and that would have actually been very helpful to a solo traveller. And you are very vulnerable on a bicycle, and I think that's what part of why it's such a roller coaster, is that you are very vulnerable, physically and emotionally. You're alone. You're kind of at the mercy of the world. I don't know where I was going with that, but
but it's easy to feel, particularly because you end up in situations where you've got to camp for an entire week, and the rain doesn't stop, and so you are constantly wet, and it's not your fault. And I think it's easy to kind of spiral into self-pity and that sort of thing, but then that also leaves room for when the rain breaks, or even while it's still raining, there can be moments of euphoria, and you kind of don't really know where it comes from. I mean, when I was living in conditions of having the same food, sometimes 3 meals a day for a week, and being on my own, just sort of in the middle of nowhere, and I found myself almost kind of wanting to do a knee slide. It was just this complete joy, and for me it was all about just paying attention to what was going on right there, and what the ground felt like under my feet, and kind of when I was climbing a hill, really trying to, I suppose, lock into that activity, and everything else in the world was so far away.
Yeah, I mean, I think you learn, I think, through these experiences, if you're paying attention, I think you learn what you can control and what you can't. And then once you can figure that out, you can work really hard on just accepting things as they are, rather than fighting them. So yes, okay, it's been raining for a week solid and my shoes are wet and my clothes are wet and my sleeping bag is wet. Well, why fight it? It's not going to make it dry.
Yeah.
So, accept it and move forward.
Yeah.
Because eventually it will start raining and everything will dry out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think it teaches you a lot, that kind of highly vulnerable, like deliberately vulnerable travel. And I don't know what it quite is about the bicycle that makes it that little bit extra good at it.
Yeah.
And I've been writing about bicycle travel for almost 2 decades now, and I still can't quite put my finger on what exactly it is that makes it just ever so slightly more effective than anything else I've tried.
Yeah.
And I have tried. I've tried long distance walking. I've tried paddling journeys. I've done horseback journeys. I've done hitchhiking. I've done overlanding. Like, I'm running out of options, but for some reason the bicycle always ends up coming back as the best balance of everything.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to someone about the idea of micro adventures, and as a mental health management technique, I suppose, being able to take yourself out of the day-to-day, even just for a day, 2 days, even shorter. Just the idea of opening up the avenue of the unknown and seeing where that leads. And I think, it all comes back to this feeling of accepting the world as it is and not trying to manhandle it in any way, and actually just enjoying being in it. You've made a film called Karen, and it's about your trip in Iran down the Karen River, and the planning that went into that trip was almost, I might be reading too far into it, but almost intentionally light. Would you accept that?
Yes, absolutely. And there has been a theme. I mean, there are times to go very, very deep into the planning, and then there are times to do, back of an envelope, what do I need to get to the start and probably get to the end, and what visas do you need, and that's about it. And yes, it was light. It wasn't just because I wanted it to be a let's see what happens type of venture. It was also because information about what's on the ground in Iran, in remote places, is really hard to get. Like, there just isn't. Like, I couldn't find a particularly authoritative map of this river, which was the longest river in the country, or what I would find along it. And the only record I could find of anyone having tried to paddle it in the past was just one guy, a guy called Dave Manby, who is a paddling legend, who had done kind of a section of whitewater kayaking down the middle section of this river and been shot at by the local nomads, and that had been about 20 years earlier. So literally, I mean, I couldn't find any evidence of anyone else trying to do it. I did go and meet this guy Dave and talk to him about his experience. He clearly thought we were idiots, completely inexperienced. But as for like topo maps or, it's just, there really wasn't anything. But, the other point about that trip is that it wasn't about the river itself. The river was a means to an end. So the real question was, in fact, if we try and follow the longest river in a country, what will we learn along the way about the place, about the people? Yeah,
because your adventures have always taken you to all corners of the world, and I feel like the bit that touches most about that tends to be the people. What would you say adventures have taught you about humans?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, when I kind of think back about all these journeys, it's that people are always central to it, actually. And I think the initial idea to try and cycle around the world, as a very naive, sheltered, Middle England raised white bloke, I thought it was going to be a wilderness experience. Like, I actually thought I needed survival skills in order to do it. And that's just because I was inexperienced and I had no idea. I just didn't know what I didn't know at that time. And it sounds so bleeding obvious now, but if you're following roads, then roads generally tend to lead between places people need to get between, which means there's always going to be people along the road. And that is almost never not the case. And okay, maybe there are in some of the, I'm going to say like in places like Canada or Russia or other big expansive parts of the world, yes, there's going to be long distances between places, but there's still traffic. There's still going to be other people using the road. And it wasn't part of the experience it wasn't the experience I thought I was going to have, but it ended up being the most rewarding in terms of what it taught me. And I think that's why I focused on that element of travel, the connections made with people from that point forward. And I really haven't spent a lot of time in remote wilderness areas because that's just not what draws me to travel. That isn't the reason I do it. I don't do it to get away from the world of humans. I do it in order to explore the amazing diversity of what the human world does look like. Where was I going with that?
Well, I just wonder whether if you're constantly meeting people many of whom you may not share a language with. I know that from my experience in Armenia, I came across so many people, and I wished that my Armenian or my Russian was good enough to actually tell them some stories, because I feel that it was by no means a quid pro quo that they would take me in, feed me, give me somewhere to sleep, and I would kind of tell them who I was. There was no need for that really, but I do wish that I had the opportunity to talk to them. But at the same time, there were times when I would feel a shepherd would invite me in, and the whole process, it could be draining. Do you think you need to be a really outgoing person to enjoy that sort of thing?
I mean, I think it probably helps in terms of energy levels, as in, if you're an extrovert, you probably crave company, in fact, in order to charge your batteries. I'm an introvert. I find the opposite. I find social situations drain my energy. I enjoy them while I have the energy, and then eventually I run out and I run away. And of course, that's all amplified when there's a language barrier and possibly a new cultural context to get used to. I still think it's valuable, and I still think even as an introvert, you can get something from those experiences. And I think the same is true reciprocally. It's not just a one-way thing. And I don't really see these encounters as, the traveller going and getting something and to take home with them. It's more that you're passing through someone else's life. You're a point of interest for them on that day. And it really doesn't have to be anything other than, a brief encounter and possibly, a kind of quick chat in sign language and a laugh about something idiosyncratic and maybe a bit of food, and that's it. I mean, that I think in a lot of cases is about as much as it is. And you could read a lot more into it, but I don't think you need to, because I think eventually you've had that same kind of experience so many times in so many different places that you kind of realise that that's what life is for most people, including you actually when you're on the road. That you're just simply, coming into contact with new people and sharing some pleasantries, and that's that. And that's. I think that really diffuses some of the kind of narratives that we get secondhand if we are back home and live in quite isolated existences in these bubbles. Everything we hear about other people, in inverted commas, is secondhand information, and normally it's the extraordinary stories, and quite often negative. So I just think it's a great moderating influence in terms of what we think about people in the world, to just have these very simple cultural encounters. And I think it helps the other way. I think it really do think that travellers passing through often quite isolated communities, it helps them to remember that there's a world out there as well.
Yeah. I guess the other major project since you left on your trip was the Transcaucasian Trail and the Armenian National Trail, which are two separate but linked projects of trail prospecting and building in Armenia. We touched on it briefly before. How did that start?
Yeah, I think it's very closely linked to what we were just talking about, actually. And the trip that became Karun, this project to follow the longest river in Iran, was also kind of my introduction to long distance trekking. I'd done very little of that before. And so directly after that, I started planning a long distance trek across Armenia. And like, long story short, Armenia is where I had ended up after this long bike journey, having met a girl who I then married, who is now my wife. And Armenia became my kind of second home. And it's such a stunning country that I just wanted to get to know it better. And so I had this idea for years, which was to walk from one end to the other. And it's another country where there's very little information to plan such a thing. But I figured one day I would do it. And after that trip in Iran, I decided I was ready. And so in 2015, I set out to walk the length of Armenia. And I didn't do very well because, firstly, as I said, there was very little information to plan such a trip. Like, the maps I basically had a 1 to 100,000 scale roadmap of the country, and then Google Earth and whatever imagery was on Google Earth, which was not very good back in 2014, 2015. No topo maps at all because they were all classified. And I did a lot of bushwhacking and got very lost and didn't get very far. But what did also happen was that I met another hiker who'd walked from France to Armenia, spent 2.5 years walking, and he had been listening to me complaining about the lack of information and maps. And also I'd kind of been saying, I've done so many of these types of adventure before, I kind of feel like it's just another thing to talk about or write about or make a film about. It doesn't really feel very fulfilling somehow. And so he then just said, well, why don't you design a route so that other people can follow it? And this was another light bulb moment, basically, because I suddenly realized there was absolutely no reason why I should not be the one to create a long distance trail across Armenia, the one that I actually wanted to follow that didn't exist. I had nothing else going on in particular in my life. I needed a project that was a bit different. And I've been thinking about this idea of being of service and being of value rather than just becoming a kind of content creator and coming up with the next story. And it made total sense to try and create the first long distance hiking route across Armenia. So that was just over 10 years ago.
How did it go?
We'll put it like this: I was still at it last year. It's actually ridiculous thinking back, because from that one chance meeting with that one French hiker came about, a decade, for me, almost a decade of full-time work, because it was an idea and then it was, a project, and then I applied for funding from the RGS, incidentally. They funded the first year of work. I got a Land Rover and some cash, and spent a year with a couple of friends, volunteers, mapping out all of these trails. From that came more offers of funding. We started an NGO. We built this whole kind of team and created a mini industry of trail developers that had not existed up until that point in modern day independent Armenia, this, relatively new post-Soviet republic that only existed since 1991. One thing led to another, and we basically mapped out this 900 kilometer route across the country and set about, in some cases, just mapping it and publishing the maps, and in some cases going out and installing signposts and painting blazes and way markers, and in some cases literally digging brand new footpaths out of the mountainside. So it's mad, because that all started out from
a conversation with a Frenchman.
Conversation with a French bloke whilst failing to do the hike itself.
Yeah.
And it's hard to kind of summarise that whole thing, because it was my life for a decade. So yeah, any attempt to just kind of quickly summarize that story is going to fall flat. But I've done it. I've given it a go.
Yeah, and I can say that my experience of the Transcaucasian Trail in Armenia. So the trail goes through Georgia, through Armenia, and into Azerbaijan. I would recommend it to absolutely anyone of any level of ability, because when I set off on it earlier this year, I had done nothing. The longest hike I'd ever done was 5 days and 80 kilometers, and that was the week before I set off. So I was a complete novice, and it was, I really think, the perfect way to get into it and to find a hobby which I know is going to serve me well for, I think, the rest of my life.
Great. Well, yeah, there's nothing like throwing yourself in at the deep end. I mean, yes, a heck of a steep learning curve, but you do learn. And
the resources that are available, thanks to you for this trail, are what made that possible. And I know that because we met on the trail, you have a hostel in Dilijan on the way, sort of on the route, and we met there. And I had spent the last 3 weeks since I'd started talking to almost nobody, but every night and every morning I would read your guide to the trail. And so it was utterly surreal when we met, but that it was exactly the right balance of challenging, being out there and doing it, but also feeling like you had the support, knowing that other people were doing it too, and that it was possible, and where the water is and where the shops are. And it was, I think, for me, the perfect thing that gave me the confidence, but also gave me the proper experience of what it's like to be out there in the wild and having that adventure.
Well, that's really good to hear. I think mostly because it kind of helps me feel confident that the principles we laid out at the beginning have been fulfilled mostly. Like we knew that the information void was the main issue. And as much work as we do on the physical infrastructure, what really helps is the knowledge, how to do it, where to start, and then what to do along the way. And yeah, that's the missing piece. It wouldn't be possible unless that information was right there and of a sufficient level of detail. And we spent, I would say, the first 6 years just mapping out all of the potential options for the route. So I would say we probably covered 10 times the distance over that 6 years in order to create the 900 kilometers that is now the so-called official route, and documenting everything we found along it, and then also creating the maps, the open source mapping that we knew all the apps would be using to help people navigate. Mm-hmm. So like behind the scenes work is vastly more than I think people would imagine. Then actually just writing the guidebook at the end was like, okay, well, we've done all the hard work. Now I just need to blurt it out. And I think I wrote the first draft in 1 month flat, because it had just been 6 years of accumulated knowledge and data and experience. And it's just like, right, let's just bash it out. And so every day I just get up and spend 3 hours writing, and there it was.
Yeah.
So now there's, of course, the whole thing about trying to keep it up to date, but let's not worry about that.
Yeah. Well, it is an incredible resource and an amazing place to explore, and I would recommend it to anyone. I think that's a very positive note to end on. Tom, thank you so much for your time and for all your work.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. And really.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Was Tom Allen on the Simple Joys podcast. A massive thanks to Tom for doing that. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed. I am aware that in our excitement we didn't even mention Simple Joys, which I'm going to try and rectify in the future, but I was really, really excited about the conversation that we had, and I hope you've enjoyed that. In the absence of any specific chat about Simple Joys, I thought I would give you kind of loosely what that conversation's made me think a few weeks on. And I think it's brought up most prominently the simple joy of bicycle travel, which is one that I massively feel but hadn't really thought about before, and it's such a huge one. I was thinking about this recently. If I was zapped back to the Stone Age, what invention would I try and replicate? And obviously it would be handy to have an iPhone or a, I don't know, whatever, but I think I would go for the bike first, because I think having freedom of movement, and that really is what a bike is. I think it's always felt that way to me, that a bike is basically synonymous with freedom. I think having that is such an important thing, both practically and also mentally. I think knowing that you have the right almost to go somewhere fairly quickly for free, and it's fun. I think particularly living in London, having that freedom is unbelievable. And yeah, I suppose it's a similar activity to walking in terms of the kind of mindfulness side of it and the physicality of it, how that brings you sort of into the present moment, I suppose. But it's obviously the trade-off with walking is how slow it is, and with cycling it's much quicker. I met cyclists in Armenia and they would do the same distance that I was doing in 2 months. They would do in a week and a half, 2 weeks. And I think a bike has the best balance in terms of all the possible modes of transport, and it just makes you feel great to know that you could get on a bike and go. And I was so inspired learning about Tom and reading his books and watching his films, and his whole life has basically just been cascading from this decision to accept adventure and to set off on a bike around the world. And he's living proof that the value in an adventure kind of only reveals itself once you're on the adventure. And it seems to me that the way Tom's life has gone and the turns that it's taken, those have happened because he was prepared to open himself up to what adventure could do for him. I'm super jazzed about the fact that our first two guests have been such adventurous people, and it's been super inspiring to talk to them, and I hope you've got something from that. This isn't going to be a podcast that's entirely about adventure. I'm hoping it'll be about all sorts of stuff. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed that. Thanks so much to Tom for doing that. Go and read Tom's books. Go and watch his films. He's a legend. And yeah, tune in next week for the 3rd episode of the Simple Joys podcast.